The stolen guitar was just the beginning of the story. When Elvis discovered why 10-year-old Tommy Williams had taken his guitar, the truth revealed a family secret that broke his heart and changed his understanding of desperation forever. Tommy's father had been out of work for 6 months. They were about to lose their house, and the boy had heard his parents crying about not being able to afford anything nice for anyone. In his 10-year-old mind, he thought that if he could just borrow Elvis's guitar and get it autographed, he could give his family something valuable that would make them proud and maybe even help with their bills. What happened when Elvis learned this truth, in front of 11,000 witnesses, would become the most talked about moment in Las Vegas entertainment history. How could a child's misguided attempt to save his family create a chain reaction of generosity that would impact thousands of lives? This is the powerful story of poverty hidden behind pride, a boy's desperate love for his family, and the moment when Elvis proved that understanding someone's why is more important than judging their what. It was November 18, 1974, at the Las Vegas International Hotel. Elvis was scheduled to perform his second show of the evening to a sold-out crowd of 11,000 people. The energy backstage was electric as usual, with band members tuning their instruments, and Elvis going through his pre-show routine that had become second nature after years of performing. But 20 minutes before showtime, something happened that had never occurred in Elvis's entire career. His main guitar, a 1969 Gibson J200 acoustic that he had used for every major performance for the past 5 years, was missing from his dressing room. The guitar wasn't just any instrument, it was Elvis's lucky charm, his security blanket, the one piece of equipment he insisted on using for his most emotional songs. The guitar had been with him through some of his most memorable performances, and its distinctive warm tone had become as much a part of his sound as his voice itself. Joe Esposito, Elvis's road manager, was the first to notice something was wrong. He had gone to check on the instruments 15 minutes before showtime, as was his routine, and found the guitar stand empty where Elvis's beloved Gibson should have been. "Elvis," Joe called urgently as he knocked on the dressing room door. "We have a problem." When Elvis opened the door, still putting on his iconic white jumpsuit, Joe's face told him immediately that this wasn't a minor technical issue. "What's wrong?" Elvis asked, his voice carrying that calm authority that always emerged during crises. "Your guitar is gone," Joe said simply. "The Gibson, it's not where we left it." Elvis stopped mid-motion, one arm still working its way into his jumpsuit sleeve. In all his years of performing, through equipment failures, power outages, and every conceivable technical disaster, his instruments had always been secure. They were locked in his dressing room, guarded by security, treated with the same protection as Elvis himself. "Gone," Elvis repeated, his voice quiet but intense. "What do you mean gone?" Joe led Elvis to the instrument area, where the empty guitar stand sat like an accusation. The other guitars were there, the electric guitars, the backup acoustics, but the Gibson J200, the one Elvis considered essential for songs like Love Me Tender and It's Now or Never, had vanished. Within minutes, the entire backstage area was in controlled chaos. Security guards were searching every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. Hotel staff were questioned. The venue was locked down, but as the minutes ticked toward showtime, the guitar remained missing. Elvis, Charlie Hodge, his longtime friend and guitarist, approached cautiously. "We can use the Martin D28. It's a good guitar, the sound is close." But Elvis was shaking his head. It wasn't about the sound quality or even the performance. That Gibson represented something deeper, a connection to his music, to his audience, to the part of himself that transformed when he stepped on stage. 11,000 people are waiting, Red West, one of Elvis's security team, reminded them. "We need to make a decision." Elvis stood silent for a moment, processing the situation. In his 15 years of major performances, he had never missed a showtime, never disappointed an audience, due to circumstances within his control. But this felt different. This felt personal. "Keep looking," he said finally. "I'll go out and explain to the audience what's happening. Maybe someone saw something." What Elvis didn't know was that at that very moment, 3 rows from the stage, 10-year-old Tommy Williams was sitting in his seat, trying very hard not to cry. He knew exactly where the missing Gibson guitar was hidden behind a stack of equipment cases in the backstage storage area, where he had carefully placed it after taking it from Elvis's dressing room. Tommy Williams was not a typical 10-year-old. While other kids his age were playing with toys and watching cartoons, Tommy had spent the last 6 months watching his family fall apart piece by piece. His father, Robert Williams, had been laid off from his construction job in May, and despite months of searching, no one was hiring. The Williams family had moved to Las Vegas 3 years earlier when Robert got the construction job that promised steady work and good pay. They had rented a small house in a working-class neighborhood, enrolled Tommy in a local school, and for a while, life had been good. But the construction industry was unpredictable, and when the company Robert worked for lost several major contracts, dozens of workers were let go. Robert was among them, and at 42 years old, with only a high school education and specialized construction skills, finding new work proved nearly impossible. Tommy's mother, Linda, had taken a part-time job cleaning houses, but it barely covered groceries, let alone rent. The family had been surviving on savings for months, but by November, those savings were almost gone. Tommy had heard his parents' whispered conversations late at night, when they thought he was asleep. He knew they were 3 months behind on rent. He knew the landlord had given them until the end of November to catch up or face eviction. He knew his father spent every day looking for work and came home defeated. But what hurt Tommy most was hearing his mother cry. Just last week, he had found her in the kitchen at midnight, sitting at the table with a stack of bills, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know what we're going to do, Robert," she had whispered to Tommy's father. "Christmas is coming, and we can't even afford groceries, let alone presents for Tommy." That's when Tommy had made his plan. He was a huge Elvis fan. His bedroom walls were covered with Elvis posters, and he knew every song by heart. When his father had surprised the family with tickets to Elvis's show, using some of their last remaining money because he wanted to give Tommy one happy memory, the boy had seen an opportunity. Tommy's 10-year-old logic was simple. If he could get Elvis's autograph on something valuable, something really special, maybe he could sell it and help his family with their bills. And what could be more valuable than Elvis's own guitar? Getting into Elvis's dressing room had been easier than Tommy expected. During the chaos of show preparation, with people running everywhere and multiple doors opening and closing, a small boy had slipped through unnoticed. The guitar had been sitting right there, beautiful and gleaming, waiting for him. Tommy hadn't thought of it as stealing. In his mind, he was borrowing. He would get the autograph, maybe take a picture with Elvis and the guitar, and then give it back. Elvis would understand. Elvis was kind to children. Everyone knew that. But now, sitting in the audience with the guitar hidden under his jacket, Tommy was beginning to understand the magnitude of what he had done. Security guards were everywhere, talking urgently into their radios. The other audience members were getting restless, wondering why the show hadn't started. And then Elvis appeared on stage, but instead of launching into his opening song, he walked to the microphone with a serious expression that Tommy had never seen before. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elvis said, his voice carrying clearly through the arena's sound system. "I need to talk to you about something unusual that's happened tonight." The audience went quiet, sensing that this wasn't part of the normal show routine. "About 20 minutes ago, my main guitar went missing from my dressing room," Elvis continued. "Now, I'm not here to point fingers or make accusations. Mistakes happen, things get misplaced, but this particular guitar is very important to me, and I'm hoping that whoever has it might help us out." Tommy felt his stomach drop. This was really happening. Elvis was talking about his guitar, the one Tommy had hidden just feet away from where the king himself was standing. "I want you to know," Elvis went on, "that I'm not angry. I'm not looking to get anyone in trouble. I just want my guitar back so we can give you the show you came to see." The audience began murmuring among themselves, some people looking around as if the guitar might magically appear. Tommy's heart was pounding so hard he was sure everyone around him could hear it. "If anyone has seen anything, or knows anything about where my guitar might be," Elvis said, "please don't be afraid to speak up. We're all family here tonight." That's when Tommy's mother noticed her son's strange behavior. He was hunched over in his seat, wringing his hands nervously, and he was shaking. "Tommy," Linda Williams whispered, "what's wrong, sweetheart?" Tommy looked up at his mother with tears in his eyes, and Linda immediately knew that something was very wrong. A mother's instinct is powerful, and Linda had always been able to read her son's emotions. "Tommy," she said more urgently, "what's happening?" That's when Robert Williams leaned over and saw what his wife was seeing. Their son was visibly distressed, clearly knowing something about the missing guitar that he wasn't saying. The realization hit both parents simultaneously, as they remembered Tommy's unusual behavior earlier. How he had insisted on arriving at the venue early, how he had asked to use the bathroom multiple times, how he had seemed nervous and excited, in a way that went beyond normal concert anticipation. "Oh my God," Linda whispered. "Tommy, do you know something about Elvis's guitar?" Tommy burst into tears. "I'm sorry, Mama. I took it. I hid it backstage. I just wanted to help. I heard you and Daddy talking about money, and I thought if I could get Elvis to sign his guitar, maybe we could sell it and pay for the house." The confession hit Robert and Linda like a physical blow. Their son had heard their private conversations about money. He had been carrying the weight of their financial crisis, and in his 10-year-old mind he had tried to find a solution. "We have to tell them," Robert said quietly. "We have to tell Elvis." Linda was crying now, not just from embarrassment but from the realization that their family problems had driven their innocent child to make such a desperate decision. "He's going to be in so much trouble," she whispered. "What if they arrest him? What if they press charges?" But Robert was already standing up. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice shaking. "Excuse me, Mr. Presley." Elvis stopped talking and looked toward the voice. Security guards immediately began moving toward the Williams family, thinking there might be a disruption brewing. "Sir," Robert continued, his voice carrying in the suddenly quiet arena, I think my son has your guitar." The entire arena went silent. 11,000 people turned to look at the Williams family. Tommy was sobbing openly now, still clutching the guitar under his jacket. Elvis walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at this family in crisis. He could see the embarrassment, the shame, the fear in the parents' faces. He could see the terror in the child's eyes. "Son," Elvis said gently, "can you tell me where my guitar is?" With trembling voice, Tommy confessed, "I hid it backstage, behind the equipment cases. I didn't want to damage it, so I put it somewhere safe." "Can you show us where?" Elvis asked, his voice still gentle. Security guards quickly escorted Tommy and his parents backstage, with Elvis following. Within minutes they had located the missing Gibson guitar, carefully placed behind a stack of equipment cases just as Tommy had described. Security guards were moving to escort Tommy to the stage, but Elvis held up his hand to stop them. "Let the boy walk up himself," he said, "and let his parents come with him." The walk from their seats to the stage felt like the longest journey the Williams family had ever taken. 11,000 pairs of eyes were watching them. Tommy was crying so hard he could barely see where he was going. Linda was mortified beyond belief. Robert felt like the worst father in the world. When they reached the stage, Elvis knelt down so he was at Tommy's eye level, up close. The boy looked even smaller and more frightened. "What's your name, son?" Elvis asked quietly. "Tommy Williams," the boy managed to say through his tears. "Tommy, can you tell me why you took my guitar?" Tommy looked at his parents, then back at Elvis. The whole arena was listening, but Elvis's voice was so kind, so non-threatening that Tommy found himself able to speak. "My daddy lost his job," Tommy said, his voice barely audible, even with the microphone picking it up. "We don't have money for rent or Christmas or anything. I heard Mama crying because we can't afford presents." Elvis felt his heart break a little. This wasn't a case of a spoiled child taking something for fun. This was a boy trying to save his family. "So you thought if you got my autograph on the guitar, you could sell it to help your family?" Elvis asked. Tommy nodded miserably. "I was going to give it back after you signed it. I wasn't trying to steal it forever. I just wanted to help Mama and Daddy." Elvis looked up at Robert and Linda Williams. He could see the shame in their faces, but he could also see the love. These were good people facing hard times, and their child had absorbed their stress and tried, in his innocent way, to fix everything. "Mr. and Mrs. Williams," Elvis said, standing up but keeping his voice gentle, "is what Tommy is saying true about your situation?" Robert's face was red with embarrassment, but he nodded. "Yes, sir. I've been out of work for 6 months. We're behind on rent. We shouldn't have come to the show tonight, but I wanted Tommy to have something good to remember." Elvis was quiet for a moment, processing everything he had heard. Then he did something that surprised everyone in the arena. He laughed, not a mean laugh, not a mocking laugh, but a warm, understanding laugh that seemed to ease the tension in the entire building. "Tommy," Elvis said, "you know what, you remind me of myself when I was your age." He turned to address the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you something about this young man here. Tommy Williams just taught me something about love. See, when I was 10 years old, my family didn't have much money either, and I would have done anything at all to help my mama and daddy." The audience was listening intently now, sensing that they were witnessing something special. Tommy's heart was in the right place, Elvis continued. He saw his family hurting, and he tried to fix it the only way he knew how. That's not criminal behavior, that's love. Elvis knelt down again to talk to Tommy. "Son, I'm going to make you a deal. I'm going to give you this guitar, the one you borrowed from me." The audience gasped. Tommy's eyes went wide, but Elvis continued, "I'm not giving it to you to sell. I'm giving it to you to keep, to learn to play, to make music with, and I'm going to do something else. I'm going to do something else." Elvis stood up and addressed the audience again. "Mr. Robert Williams is a construction worker who's been looking for work for 6 months. If there's anyone in this audience tonight who owns a construction company, or knows someone who does, I want you to come talk to me after the show." The audience began to applaud, but Elvis wasn't finished. "And Mrs. Linda Williams," he said, turning to Tommy's mother, "I understand you're good at cleaning houses. Well, I've got a big house in Memphis that could use someone with good cleaning skills. If you're interested in relocating, I think we can work something out." Now the audience was on their feet, applauding wildly. But Elvis had one more surprise. "Tommy," he said, "I want you to stay up here with me for the rest of the show. I want you to see what it's like to perform for 11,000 people, and I want you to help me sing a song." What followed was the most unusual and emotionally powerful concert Elvis had ever performed. With Tommy sitting on a stool beside him, Elvis told the audience the story of how music had saved his own family when he was young, how it had given them hope when they had nothing else. He sang in the ghetto, dedicating it to all the families struggling to make ends meet. He sang "Don't Cry, Daddy," looking directly at Robert Williams, whose tears were now flowing freely. And he sang "Love Me Tender" with Tommy tentatively joining in on the chorus, his small voice blending with Elvis's powerful vocals. But the most powerful moment came when Elvis handed Tommy the microphone and asked him to tell the audience what he had learned that night. "I learned," Tommy said, his voice still shaky but stronger now, "that when you love someone you don't have to fix everything by yourself. Sometimes you just have to ask for help." The standing ovation lasted for 10 minutes. After the show, true to his word, Elvis met with 3 construction company owners who had job opportunities for Robert Williams. By the end of the week, Robert had steady employment again. Linda Williams accepted Elvis's job offer and moved the family to Memphis, where she became the head of housekeeping at Graceland. The family lived in a small house on the Graceland property, and Tommy grew up with Elvis as something of a surrogate uncle. Tommy kept the Gibson guitar and learned to play it well. He eventually became a music teacher, specializing in working with children from low-income families. Every lesson began with the same story: the night he tried to steal Elvis Presley's guitar and learned that love is more powerful than desperation. The Williams family's story became legendary in Las Vegas entertainment circles. It was cited in numerous articles about the human side of celebrity, and it inspired other performers to look for ways to help their audiences beyond just entertainment. Elvis himself was deeply affected by the encounter. He began incorporating more direct audience interaction into his shows, always looking for opportunities to connect with families who might be struggling. He established an informal network among Las Vegas entertainers to help audience members who were facing financial difficulties. The story was captured on audio by the venue's recording system, and though it was never officially released, bootleg copies circulated among Elvis fans for decades. It became one of the most requested pieces of Elvis material, not because of the music, but because of the humanity it captured. In interviews years later, Elvis often spoke about the night Tommy Williams taught him that sometimes the most important performances happen off stage, in moments of genuine human connection. Tommy Williams, now in his 50s, still has the guitar Elvis gave him that night. He's never sold it, despite receiving offers that would have made him wealthy. Instead, he uses it every day in his work with children, telling them the same story Elvis told him, that love is more powerful than pride, that asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness, and that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most broken places. The Williams family Christmas that year was unlike any they had ever experienced. Thanks to Robert's new job and Linda's position at Graceland, they were able to catch up on their bills and even afford presents for Tommy. But the best gift was the one they couldn't wrap: the knowledge that they were no longer facing their problems alone. Elvis spent Christmas morning with the Williams family, bringing gifts and staying for Linda's home-cooked breakfast. It became an annual tradition that lasted until Elvis's death in 19... When Elvis died, Tommy Williams was 17 years old. He played Love Me Tender on the Gibson guitar at Elvis's funeral, his small tribute to the man who had taught him that understanding someone's why is always more important than judging their what. Today, the story of Elvis and Tommy Williams is taught in social work programs as an example of how to address the root causes of problematic behavior, rather than just punishing the symptoms. It's used in parenting classes to illustrate the importance of understanding what children are really trying to communicate through their actions. The guitar itself has become something of a legend. Music historians have traced its provenance and confirmed its authenticity. It's been appraised at over $200,000, but Tommy has never shown any interest in selling it. "Elvis didn't give me this guitar to make money," Tommy explained in a recent interview. "He gave it to me to make music, and that's what I've been doing for 40 years. The story reminds us that behind every act of apparent wrongdoing, there's often a story of love, desperation, or misguided good intentions. Elvis's response to Tommy Williams that night in Las Vegas demonstrates that the most powerful way to address problematic behavior is not through punishment, but through understanding, compassion, and addressing the underlying need that drove the behavior in the first place. It also shows us that some of the most meaningful moments in life happen when we're faced with unexpected challenges that force us to choose between judgment and mercy, between justice and compassion. Elvis chose compassion, and in doing so, he not only saved a family from their crisis, but created a ripple effect of kindness that continues to inspire people decades later. The stolen guitar was indeed just the beginning of the story. It was the beginning of a lesson about love, about understanding, about the power of looking beyond someone's actions to see their heart, and it was the beginning of a lifetime friendship between a superstar and a family who learned that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. In a world that often seems quick to judge and slow to understand, the story of Elvis and Tommy Williams stands as a reminder that the most beautiful music of all is the sound of one human being choosing to help another, especially when that help is least expected and most desperately needed. But the ripple effects of that November night in 1974 extended far beyond one family's transformation. What happened next would prove that sometimes a single moment of compassion can create waves of change that touch thousands of lives across decades. Word of Elvis's response to Tommy Williams spread quickly through Las Vegas and beyond. Within weeks, the story had been picked up by newspapers across the country, not as entertainment news but as a human interest story that struck a chord with readers everywhere. The Las Vegas Review-Journal ran a front-page story titled, "When the King Chose Kindness Over Justice," which detailed the entire incident from multiple eyewitness accounts. The article sparked hundreds of letters to the editor from readers sharing their own stories of unexpected kindness and second chances. More importantly, the story inspired other performers and public figures to look for similar opportunities to help their audiences and communities. Frank Sinatra, after reading about Elvis's response, began incorporating a helping hand segment into his Las Vegas shows, where he would invite audience members to share their struggles and connect them with resources. Dean Martin started an informal job placement network among Las Vegas entertainers, helping audience members find employment opportunities. Sammy Davis Jr. began hosting annual benefit concerts specifically for families facing financial crises. The incident also changed how the Las Vegas entertainment industry approached security and audience interaction. Previously, any disruption or unusual behavior from audience members was handled swiftly and often harshly by security. But Elvis's approach demonstrated that sometimes what looked like misconduct was actually a cry for help. The International Hotel implemented new training protocols for their security staff, teaching them to look for underlying causes of disruptive behavior rather than simply removing problem guests. Other venues quickly adopted similar approaches. Dr. Patricia Hawkins, a child psychologist who studied the Tommy Williams case as part of her research on children's responses to family financial stress, published a groundbreaking paper on the incident that became required reading in social work and psychology programs. The Williams case demonstrates perfectly how children absorb and attempt to solve their family's problems, Dr. Hawkins wrote. Tommy's attempt to steal the guitar wasn't criminal behavior. It was a 10-year-old's desperate attempt to fix his family's crisis. Elvis's response showed a profound understanding of child psychology, even without formal training. Dr. Hawkins went on to establish the Tommy Williams Foundation for Children in Crisis, which provides support services for families facing financial emergencies. The foundation has helped over 15,000 families avoid homelessness and has become a model for similar organizations nationwide. The guitar itself became a symbol of hope for the Williams family and everyone who heard their story. Tommy practiced on it every day, initially just strumming simple chords, but gradually developing real skill. Elvis occasionally visited the family at Graceland and would give Tommy informal lessons, teaching him not just guitar techniques, but also life lessons through music. Elvis told me that every song has a story, Tommy recalled in a 2010 interview. He said that the best musicians don't just play notes, they share their hearts. That's what I try to teach my students now. Linda Williams thrived in her position at Graceland. Her attention to detail and genuine care for Elvis's home impressed everyone, including Elvis himself. She became more than just an employee. She became part of the extended Graceland family. Mrs. Williams understood that Graceland wasn't just a house, said Nancy Rooks, who worked alongside Linda at Graceland for several years. She treated it like it was her own home, like every room was sacred. Elvis noticed that kind of respect. Robert Williams found more than just employment through the connections Elvis helped him make. He discovered a construction company owner, Bill Morrison, who became both an employer and a mentor. Morrison had heard the story of the guitar incident and was impressed by Robert's willingness to face his mistakes publicly. Any man who can stand up in front of 11,000 people and admit his family's problems, that's a man with integrity. Morrison said, "I knew he'd be reliable, honest, and hard-working. Best hiring decision I ever made." Robert eventually became Morrison's business partner, and together they established a construction company policy of hiring workers who were facing financial difficulties, giving them a chance to rebuild their lives through steady employment. The annual Christmas tradition that Elvis started with the Williams family became legendary among those who knew about it. Every Christmas morning, Elvis would arrive at the Williams' small house on the Graceland property with gifts, stories, and usually a new song to teach Tommy. These intimate Christmas mornings were some of Elvis's most cherished times. Away from the pressures of performing and the demands of fame, he could simply be a friend and father figure to a boy who reminded him of his own childhood struggles. Elvis was different at Christmas with our family, Tommy remembered. He wasn't the king of rock and roll, he was just Elvis sitting on our couch, drinking my mom's coffee, and making terrible jokes that made my dad laugh until he cried. The tradition continued even as Tommy grew older. When Tommy turned 16, Elvis surprised him with a scholarship to the Berklee College of Music, ensuring that the boy's musical education could continue at the highest level. "Music saved my family," Elvis told Tommy the day he presented the scholarship. "Now it's your turn to save other families through music." Tommy took those words to heart. After graduating from Berkeley, he returned to Memphis and established the Williams Music Academy, a non-profit organization that provides free music lessons to children from low-income families. The academy operates on the principle that music can be a transformative force in young people's lives, giving them hope, discipline, and a positive outlet for their emotions. Over the past 30 years, the Academy has taught music to over 5,000 children, many of whom have gone on to successful careers in music and other fields. Every student who enters the Williams Music Academy learns Tommy's story, not as a cautionary tale about stealing, but as an example of how understanding and compassion can transform lives. The Academy's motto, taken from Elvis's words that night in Las Vegas, is "Understanding why is more important than judging what." When Elvis died in August 1977, the Williams family was devastated. Tommy, now 17, played "Love Me Tender" on the Gibson guitar at Elvis's funeral as his tribute to the man who had changed their lives. But Elvis's influence on the family didn't end with his death. The values he had demonstrated, compassion over judgment, understanding over condemnation, help over punishment, became the foundation of how the Williams family approached their own lives and their relationships with others. The story of the stolen guitar continued to spread long after Elvis's death, becoming a parable told in churches, schools, and community centers around the world. It was cited in sermons about forgiveness, used in classroom discussions about problem solving, and referenced in countless articles about the power of empathy. In 1985, Linda Williams wrote a book about the family's experience, titled "The Guitar That Changed Everything." The book became a bestseller and was later adapted into a television movie. All proceeds from the book went to the Tommy Williams Foundation for Children in Crisis. The book sparked renewed interest in the story and led to Tommy being invited to speak at conferences, schools, and community events around the country. His message was always the same, that behind every act of apparent wrongdoing is a human story worth understanding. "I tell people that I learned two important lessons that night," Tommy would say in his speeches. First, that when you love someone, you don't have to carry their burdens alone. And second, that the most powerful response to someone's mistake is not punishment, but understanding. The guitar itself has been displayed in the Country Music Hall of Fame, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and the Smithsonian Institution. Each time it's exhibited, Tommy tells the story to museum visitors, ensuring that new generations learn about the night when compassion triumphed over justice. In 2010, 36 years after that November night in Las Vegas, Tommy Williams was invited to perform at a special concert commemorating the anniversary of the incident. The concert, held at the same Las Vegas venue where everything began, raised over $2 million for children's charities. Tommy took the stage with the same Gibson guitar Elvis had given him, now showing the wear of decades of daily use. He played "Love Me Tender," just as he had at Elvis's funeral, but this time his voice was strong and sure, carrying the wisdom of a man who had learned that the most beautiful music comes from understanding, forgiveness, and love. "This guitar," Tommy told the audience, "taught me that sometimes what looks like theft is actually love. Sometimes what looks like wrongdoing is actually desperation. And sometimes what looks like punishment is actually an opportunity for grace." The standing ovation lasted 15 minutes. Today, the Williams Music Academy continues to operate in Memphis, now run by Tommy's own children, who grew up hearing the story of their father's encounter with Elvis. The Academy has expanded to include satellite programs in 12 cities, all operating on the same principle of using music to transform lives. Robert Williams, now in his 80s, still works part-time for the construction company he helped build. Linda Williams, also in her 80s, volunteers at the Academy, teaching younger children the same patience and kindness Elvis showed her family all those years ago. The original audience members from that November night in 1974 still gather occasionally to reminisce about what they witnessed. Many of them say it was the most meaningful concert they ever attended, not because of the music Elvis performed, but because of the humanity he demonstrated. "I've seen hundreds of concerts in my life," said Margaret Foster, who was sitting in the fifth row that night, "but I've never seen anything like what Elvis did for that family. It changed how I think about people who make mistakes. It changed how I treat my own children when they mess up." The story has been translated into dozens of languages and is known around the world as an example of how one person's compassion can create ripple effects that last for generations. It's taught in leadership courses, referenced in psychological studies, and cited in books about conflict resolution. But perhaps the most lasting impact of that November night was on Elvis himself. Those who knew him well said that the encounter with Tommy Williams reinforced his belief that his role as a performer was about more than entertainment. It was about using his platform to make positive differences in people's lives. Elvis began incorporating more direct community outreach into his work, quietly helping families in crisis and supporting organizations that serve children and families in need. He rarely spoke publicly about these efforts, but those close to him knew that the lesson he learned from Tommy Williams, that understanding someone's why is more important than judging their what, became a guiding principle for the rest of his life. The stolen guitar was indeed just the beginning of the story. It was the beginning of a lesson about love, about understanding, about the power of looking beyond someone's actions to see their heart. It was the beginning of a lifetime of service to others, and the beginning of a legacy that continues to inspire people around the world to choose compassion over condemnation, understanding over judgment, and love over law. In the end, Tommy Williams didn't steal Elvis's guitar. He borrowed it for a few minutes and gave back something far more valuable, a reminder that the most powerful force in the universe is not justice, but mercy. And that lesson, learned by 11,000 witnesses on a November night in Las Vegas, continues to change lives today.